Hello, Rimfire friends. I know I'm kind of zoomed in here. I'm filming this impromptu video real quick about a project I got going on. I thought I'd bring you guys along for the ride. So apologize for this bizarre format system and the talking hands, of course, that some people can't stand. But anyway, one of the questions I get asked most often is CZ 455, 457 firing pin profiling. That's, to bring out the most accuracy when you have a dedicated CZ 455 or 457 in with a switch barrel platform in whatever caliber you choose, in my case 22 long rifle. So what that means is the CZs are designed to have multiple calibers, 17, 22. That's not multiple, that's two, but you know what I mean. Because in certain countries, you're limited to how many serial numbers you can have. So CZ came out with a rifle that was one serial number, multiple barrels, and it's certainly a genius idea. However, there's a compromise, and you have a barrel that's held in place with two grub screws, and even worse, a very sloppy, in some cases, receiver to barrel fit. So you get some movement on occasion, or some chamber distortion if you torque those screws down, and what have you. But anyway, one of the ways that you can maximize accuracy is if you glue your barrel in like I did, and you reprofile your firing pin for whatever caliber your rifle is dedicated to, in my case 22 long rifle. So that's done. So I talk about this quite often. There's lots of people who have done it. If you're curious about it, test it for yourself. It's a pretty easy mod to do, and that is not, having said that, that's not the subject of this video, but it's along the same lines. What I want to talk to you about, guys, is firing pin springs. Now, a firing pin spring is an important component of any rimfire or centerfire rifle, but rimfire in particular, because a lot of things go on. We practice more than centerfire by far, so there's a lot more rounds that go off, and a lot of people take for granted that a firing pin spring is a consumable thing. A firing pin is as well, but less so. A firing pin spring will wear out over time, just like the springs on your car. Now that's dependent on how long you have the rifle and how often you shoot it, but also can be dependent on the quality of the spring and the action itself, how much stress it's under. So these are all things to consider. Also the quality of the spring. So these are things to consider. So I'm gonna say that Anschutz, for example, recommends for their competition 54 line to change the spring yearly. And that sounds crazy to some people, but that's how much Anschutz puts into faith into keeping that firing pin fresh for consistent accuracy. So one thing that's come about in my shooting is that I've noticed that this 455 is starting to have some light strikes. Where it never had them before, and just very recently. So what I did as a test was I installed a shim in this firing pin spring to give it a little bit of preload, and they went away. Therefore, I knew it was time to change the spring. I could have just ordered the spring, but I just wanted to see if that's actually what was happening. And I'm going to show you an interesting feature or an interesting result of what happens with CZ springs on occasion inside this, so you guys can see for yourself how yours is. Now, what I'm actually going to do is I've actually ordered, let me have the addresses. I've actually ordered some plus 10% firing pin springs from our good friend Yo Dave. A lot of people don't know that Yo Dave lives about 40 or 45 minutes from me here on Vancouver Island. Got those from him, and I want to talk about plus 10% springs. Okay. So first of all, I'm going to do my best to get this apart with no tool, because I'm kind of not in an area where I have stuff. Oh, this is going to be a fail, I think. Oh boy. Oh, am I going to do it? Oh, let me pause this. Hang on. All right, sorry about that. So I installed a shim in this, which isn't the subject of this video, but here is the factory CZ455 spring, and those of you who are followers of my channel will know that this spring is not that old. This is a late model 455 that was brand new in the box. I've had it since, geez, I don't know, April, March or so last year. So it's just a little over a year old. And if you have a good look at this spring, you can see that it's a little bit cattywampus there, right? It's a little bit canted here and there, a little bit squiggly. And the reason that's important is when you have a spring like this that compresses over time, inside the channel of this firing pin, you can see that there's a little bit of movement, natural movement. And so as this spring is compressed, it isn't supported fully. And so it's allowed to cant in various directions. And over time, it develops kind of a form. Now, I don't know if you guys can see it, but when I turn this in the light, if I get in frame, if I turn this in the light, you might not be able to see it, but what I'm seeing here is there's high spots on the walls of the spring. And that's from wear as it compresses and decompresses inside the firing pins, inside the firing pin, sorry. And that's important because the wear, the contact, is weakening the spring because the wall diameter or the thickness of the gauge of the spring is reduced, and also it causes friction on the firing pin spring. So a whole bunch of things are happening in this scenario, which all equal it's time to change this. So, like I mentioned, I can go with the regular one. I got my little Yo Dave out in here. Or I could go with a plus 10%. Now, I've done this many times, okay? And I want to tell you that I'm not going to say my opinion on is plus 10% worth it in this video. I am going to shoot them side by side for you guys to see. But it's almost pointless because the spring is so worn out. So it won't really show too much. It's not really an accurate representation. But the reason I went with plus 10% is because as the spring wears, it becomes a normal. I'm not a big fan of plus 10%, but in this particular case, a little bit of break-in would be substantially better. Now you can see the size difference here. It is quite substantial. Now, you can also see that the Yo Dave's is thinner, not so thick compared to the factory one, and much longer. I would say like a good 3/4 of an inch longer. And they're quite like, I gotta shim in here, but if you ever have to shim your firing pin spring, don't do something silly like put a piece of steel or something, or a washer or something like that. Really, the best choice is another piece of spring that's of similar gauge, and that'll bring it back to life. Gives it a little bit of give too, right? So this was all it took to bring the failure to fires back to life. That's kind of like what I always do to see if that's the case. And so basically this guy fits in here, and that's the difference between them. And I will say that straight out of the package, as you guys saw, look at the difference in finish from the Yo Dave. It is rough like it was ground on the sidewalk. I will say, though, that the last one I saw, which was for a 457, was rough cut with burrs on either end. But this one is smooth finished. It is semi-dressed. It's just like it is rough. Like it's catching my finger like crazy. So there's a lot of work still left to do on this. And this spring is not 100% straight. These are, like I said, these are straight out of the package from Yo Dave. These are not what you would associate with being like a super well-dressed, high-finished spring. But this one is much better. It feels much straighter. But this one is, I don't know if you could pick it up. Well, you can't really see it, but I can see it side by side just looking at it. This one's got a kind of a bow to it on both ends, but this one's nice and straight. But I ordered two, and that's really just for shipping reasons, because it's a good idea, like I said, to change them more often. So I will I'll film a video of them back to back, or I'll definitely film some groups with the new spring and show you how it groups compared to the old one. But really, this was a purpose to solve my occasional failure to fires, which, like, because of the match barrel, a bullet that won't go off and is now stuck in the chamber is potentially a very serious issue in the middle of a stage. And if you can't rectify it quickly, you'll either time out or have to bow out of that particular stage, and it can ruin a match for you. So having a round stuck in the chamber is probably one of the worst case scenarios when you're in a match. So anyway, so I thought I would show you what I'm up to with the 455. I'm not quite sure when I'm actually going to take it out to the range, but definitely that's something you guys should be looking for inside your CZ rifle. The 455, 452 Brunos are all similar. Of course, the Brunos are a little bit different setup than the 455 and 452, but you can kind of get the idea. The setup is similar, just the springs are different. And of course, the 457 is completely different. But again, he does offer plus 10% springs for that particular rifle as well. And you know, once I get to shooting, maybe we'll talk a little bit more about the plus 10% spring and what it's actually supposed to accomplish, besides being a band-aid for every other kind of issue that comes up with sort of rimfire ignition. But anyway, I'm going to leave this one here. Any questions or comments, leave them below, and I'll do my best to answer them. But if not, I'll catch you guys at the next one.